So thus far, we discussed what's the definition of inclusion, diversity and inclusion. We explained what's cultural diversity within this collection of concepts. And we also talked about why it's worth it to have this topic on our agenda. Now I would like to move on to the how, which is perhaps the most interesting bit of the topic. In my philosophy, what we need is an approach which helps us to comprehend and address diversity and inclusion in its entirety and prioritizes the essential message and purpose of diversity and inclusion in a very practical and applicable way. Which means that I am going to be able to talk about diversity and inclusion in an intelligent way. First step for this is to understand how big this topic is and be aware that you're going to be managing groups of people with very different needs, and you are going to, or we should all be humble about it, because there will be many facts that we don't know, and we are going to have to take on a learning mindset, a growth mindset about diversity and inclusion, and we're going to be able to handle it in a flexible way, because as new information comes our way about what these different people need, we are going to have to react. So for this, basically, I've looked at how it is in the world in general, what my experience tells, and I created the human connection philosophy and also a framework. The philosophy is what we are going to discuss today. The framework is what I teach during my trainings, and that goes much deeper, and it really gives you practical step-by-step guidance how to achieve the kind of diversity and the kind of inclusion that you are after. Today, we are going to discuss only the foundation of this, the very philosophy. Okay, so what are the wrong reasons why we should not think about diversity and inclusion? Yeah, so let's look at why we shouldn't do it, and then let's look into why we should and how we can achieve it. Why we shouldn't do it is simply to satisfy numbers. So if you only want to create a diverse team or a diverse organization for the sake of satisfying the numbers, but you're not planning to invest into inclusion, then you can stop right now, because it's most likely going to be damaging for your organization and for the people who are in it. If I look from the personal point of view, if you would like to be part of an organization that is diverse and it's advertising its diversity, and you're not prepared to approach people differences with an open mind, then I think that you'll have to really train and get familiar with the idea of what kind of diversity there is. Because if you just merge in and you don't have a positive and open-minded attitude, it's going to be really damaging for you and for your career. What I see is how it's approached nowadays, okay? So in organizations, and it doesn't matter whether I'm talking about businesses, non-profit, in general, organizations, is that they are saying, I have, incredible diversity. The very least, they have diversity in nationalities, at least where I come from. I'm half Dutch, and we are very famous with speaking languages and having really diverse workplaces in terms of nationalities. Now that's great, and people say it's going so well in diversity, and I have such a good international team. And then you start talking to the people, and you start talking to the team members, and then you sort of start to see that not everybody is as happy as, let's say, the manager is about this whole diversity thing. And I had several consultation projects that I did for international companies, and very often what you see is diversity is approached in a very segmented way. So only HR approaches it and only in certain processes and not in other ones. So for example, it's not part of the hiring process. Everybody is given equal chances and everybody is asked the same questions, it sounds good. And then you come into the company and then HR provides you with discussion groups where you can give feedback. Now, what happens is usually many things go wrong at the hiring process if you are looking at a multicultural pot of people to hire from. And also from a personal point of view, if you're not familiar with either the industry or with the national culture or both, or the environment in general, it's very difficult for you to determine whether this is the right position for you, whether you're arriving to a place where you can do your best and you can bring that optimum the very least. So if things are not clear during the hiring process, which happens a lot, then you have a problem, and you have basically the strategy that says, I'd like to invite diversity and I will provide excellent discussion groups. But what's missing is to represent this in the entirety of the HR process. And another very common mistake is that you're going to gather feedback from these discussion groups and then there is no one to escalate into, because diversity and inclusion kind of doesn't have any other place than what I just mentioned. And then you're sitting there with a bunch of learners. Okay, these people are very uncomfortable because they feel like they are always, they have difficulty speaking up because the others speak too much, or they have difficulties because of the facilities. Maybe it's something very physical, like something in a building that makes them feel uncomfortable. It can be that there is a lack of microwave because maybe, for example, in the Netherlands, we don't have warm lunch, and it's a massive problem for many people. And it's a small thing, but if you live your life every day in an environment where you're slightly uncomfortable, it's just going to add up and it's going to affect your effectivity, and you're going to start a complaint. So it can be this really small thing, but it can be much more serious things. Just what I talked about when I talked about breastfeeding and team dynamics, for example, in international teams, the style of leadership, let's say in the Philippines, in Russia, and in the Netherlands, and in Hungary would be very different. So if you have a team that includes these nationalities, it's a very interesting thing to look at how effectively they can work together and how effectively a leader can work and how people feel in that environment. Okay, so these are very typical mistakes that everybody thinks that diversity is kind of, we are talking about it, and nobody is discriminating. Like, I'm not angry at the people just because they have a different background or skin color, so then it should be good. It's much more deep than that. And in a strategic level, you have to address it pretty much on every level. Okay, so what we need here, if you listen to me now, I was mentioning HR, I was mentioning basically strategy of the C-suite, I was mentioning the personal experiences of the people who are participating. So what is this? What we need is a multidisciplinary approach and common sense. Okay, and this is where my model will come into, or my philosophy will come handy. And let me share my screen again. So we discussed this. This is the effect of inclusion or exclusion on your productivity as a company and as a person. And now we are going to skip this and we are going to come here. Okay. The human connection philosophy rests on the simple idea that it is the human experience that defines your personal development as well as the organizational success. It is the human experience that organizations are built upon. This is the interpersonal connections and how well they work out. And I think that this is not a new thing to talk about, but I do believe that there are these massive holes in how we think about the human experience, because usually what you see is that either we are thinking about people's well-being at the workplace, and that's again something that typically HR will address, or we are thinking about the strategy, how we can how we can, for example, create diversity because it makes sense economically, or because we have policies to follow, but no one kind of puts it together. So what if I am going to focus on the human experience and my organization's success at the same time? The human connection philosophy invites you to invest into this human experience, because I believe that the human experience intertwines and defines our life and our organizations. If human experience is a positive experience, and if you can get most of your people into this optimum, to bring their optimum, you're going to see increased efficiency, increased creativity, increased effectivity, which leads to a competitive advantage. And if you give this little extra, that you are going to look out for the differences and you're going to approach conversations in a very open, with a very open mind, you are going to find new ideas, right? So this is when this blue arrow is going to go up towards the sky, and you can not only achieve a stable organization and a sustainable success, but you are going to actually be able to create a competitive advantage just based on diversity and inclusion. We are going to talk about it how in a moment, but on the other hand, we have to see this interdependency, that if people don't feel good, if the personal experience is not all right, people will leave, people will get bitter, people will get less efficient, and it's going to create a toxic environment, and it's going to create energy loss. And energy loss from a personal point of view is bad. We have only one life. We don't want to lose energy on difficulties because of discrimination. That makes no sense. Also, as an organization, if you lose energy, you lose from your success. It's very often expressed in money. If you don't nail diversity and inclusion, I go as far as saying it quite boldly, you are going to lose money, because you lose efficiency. And maybe it doesn't hurt you immediately because you're a big organization, but just think about it. How much could you save, and how much extra potential could you unlock if you invested into the human experience? Just an idea. Okay. I would like to introduce you to the very details of my human connection philosophy. Here, again, we see that focusing on the human experience, how we approach, manage, and utilize differences is going to be the key. Now, this is how I imagine this. As you might have seen, we have this little character with the pink bow tie. This little character symbolizes us, symbolizes the single human whose life is at stake. And that's what we have to understand. If we are looking at it from a management point of view, you put people's, life at stake, not like life is they will die, but if they work for you for, let's say, 3, 4, 5 years, you're responsible for those years to a certain extent. And we have to have enough common sense and enough humanity within us to understand what that means and what responsibility it means beyond satisfying the shareholders, for example. If you look at this wheel, this meant to be a wheel, then in the middle, and I'm really sorry, actually, I don't know what it's called. This middle part of the wheel, this is where it's attached to any kind of vehicle. It might be a unicycle, it might be a bus, it might be an aeroplane, it doesn't matter. But this wheel has to work. If you have only one, it's important that it works because you have only one. If you have many wheels, then it's important that they all go to the same direction, because otherwise you're not going to get much further. So what you see is that this is where a person connects to your organization. And how does it happen? The wheel itself represents the organization, and the connection represents how a personal, what influences the personal experience in this context. Okay, so we are going to look at the structure. For example, the organizational structure that can really hinder diversity and inclusion if, for example, part-time workers will not be given the opportunity to advance in their career. You're going to lose them. And as the person who is there, maybe you love your job and you'll just have to leave because they don't give you the option to go further, or they don't give you the option to work part-time at all. This is typically then actually taking us to laws and regulations. Very often it's government regulations in a certain country where your organization belongs that prevent you from managing diversity and inclusion very well. And that can really weaken this connection, for example, right? Because we are connected as a human being to the organization. The strength which carries the weight of any vehicle, which this wheel belongs to, is going to be given by these connections, which means that your human connection to the organization is going to provide the strength of the organization that can carry the weight of success, and it can go to the right direction where you want to be. So it's important to focus on the organization and the human being at the same time and mention them on the same page. If you look at the organizational culture, this is going to be one of our main resources for diversity and inclusion. Why is that? It's because although, for example, different countries might have their own cultures, different organizations bring their own cultures, but the local company culture that you're part of is going to be unique. And you, as part of the organization, will directly experience the culture. If it's a positive, open-minded, accepting, and inclusive culture, you are going to thrive. And as an organization, you have an excellent opportunity to alter this culture, to introduce things, to promote this open-mindedness, to promote more knowledge about the different kind of diversity that is to be found in the organization, and to help people understand each other, to empower them to ask questions about each other's situations, to create an environment that's accepting and curious again and encouraging. And also, if we move on to a more personal situation, your personal development, how you can develop in an organization, is also very important, because the opportunities that you are given are also going to be part of your experience, of your human experience. And if, for example, you're gay and you're not given the opportunity to represent the company on a higher level because it's just not accepted in a certain culture, that is going to be a big problem, a big barrier. And the question for the companies, or the organizations, how are we going to overcome it? And this also could come from you. So if you are in any kind of group of minority that have been hurt typically because of their characteristics, maybe in your culture and in your organization, it's already okay, it's already accepted, but can you accept it? Can you step into that role where you want to be? Can you practice the human connection philosophy and say that I am important here, I am part of this organizational the treasure of the organization, you know, I'm part of the value of the organization with what I can do, and I am able to step into this role because I accept myself. So will the organization help you with it? Will you be conscious to keep the human connection model in mind, to see your worth and help yourself when you need help? Because it's always coming from both sides. And that's also very important. When I say we have to look at both the organization and the person and the human experience, I'm not only calling out the organizations, I'm calling out you, I'm calling out myself, because we are responsible for how we are being treated to a certain extent. We are responsible for signaling when something is not okay, or signaling when we need something. And I understand that in many cultures, it's very, very difficult. It's not a characteristic in the culture to speak up. But if we would like to achieve inclusion, and if we would like to make diversity work, someone has to make the first step, and we have to be conscious about it. However little that contribution might be, just something to begin with that you feel comfortable with is going to steer this wheel to the right direction. And then we arrive to interpersonal relationships here. These interpersonal relationships really just symbolize that we are all interacting within the organization. And if you have differing opinions, it's an excellent thing to have a debate, an intelligent debate. And if you achieved a psychologically safe and curious environment even, then you can see and analyze these different opinions and you can build from them. You can come up with something fantastic. On my website, you're going to find an article I wrote, and it's, again, sort of a case study, and it's about rules. If you check out my website, it's called mindfulgeneration.eu, you see the articles and you see the article about rules. And that is exactly about that. How can you benefit from when people think about, for example, rules completely differently? It's a very, very interesting area to explore when it comes to rules or comes to leadership. Okay, so again, the idea is that you've got this wheel, and the strength of the wheel will depend on the human experience, and the strength of the wheel will be given by focusing on how humans connect within your organization and how connected one can feel and how accepted one can feel within the organization. Now, if you see that this wheel is obviously going somewhere, you have to give it a strategy and you have to give it a direction. And this is when we have to, again, step out a little bit, step aside, zoom out, and see that I would like diversity to happen. And I would like it to have a place within the organization and to give it a direction, which means that it has to be harmonized with all levels of the organization. You have to be able to understand why you do it. You have to see what's happening. And if you are able to align most of the things, and that's why the wheel is, I think, such a great example, because the strength doesn't rely on only one little part of it. The strength relies on the many little connections we make. It's infinite. So whatever positive change you make is going to give strength. And then if it works well and if the wheel runs well, you can follow your strategy and you can go to the right direction and reach your goals. Now, what do we need for this? Because that's also very, very, very important. If you look at the wheel, it's on the road, but what do you need to achieve this human connection philosophy? What is the kind of way of thinking that will bring you to this philosophy? So one thing for sure is awareness. You have to be able to aware of that this thing is happening, and you have to understand that you are looking at diversity and inclusion within your context, and you will have to approach it with a purpose. If you are not clear on either of these things, your message is going to be diluted. So if you would like to address diversity and inclusion, you have to know what it means to your organization, which groups are represented, and how you're going to address them. And you will have to have a purpose. So, for example, I would like my organization to be a place where people don't want to leave because they feel great and they feel like they can develop, and in turn my organization is going to accumulate intellectual capital and knowledge, and I will manage that knowledge, and this is my value. So I am going to have people from diverse, for example, disciplines, and I'm going to give them excellent training to be able to communicate, to be able to find the interlap, and to be able to share their knowledge and have fruitful debates in an intelligent and productive way. You can say that, but for that you have to be aware, you have to define the context, and you have to have a purpose. Because if you're talking, yeah, this diversity is good, I want everybody to feel good, that's just not good enough. You have to be much more purposeful. The second thing is, sorry, just one more thing actually about awareness, is that diversity is really everywhere. So you have to just open your eyes to that it's there and how much potential there is in that. Because even if you have a very small team from the same nationality, within the same industry, just the personal characteristics are going to give you so much beautiful diversity and so many differing ideas. So if you look out for them, if you look out for this person is, for example, he has dyslexia, but he's, you know, he oversees these big complex things, that's great. And the other person is really, you know, this nitpicky, then actually when you combine them, it's going to be something wonderful, because you are most likely to get super creative ideas and complex solutions, but with the precision that is also very nice to take it to the next level. And then you add the next person who is maybe a real researcher, and that person is going to be able to really provide you with the right background, with the right tools, find what you need, you know, look into your teams and discover the potential, be aware of diversity. Now I really do move on to the next deal. And this is this: skills, tools, and training. If you're purposeful and if you understand what kind of diversity you're addressing, we all have to be humble about, I'm only repeating myself now, but we really have to be humble about what it means, and how many different types of groups there are, and how many different ways there are for us to facilitate them. Same again, if you're looking at the personal perspective, that if you have to discover your own diversity, and you have to ask, what do I need? How do I ask for help? How do I ask for you know, where to join or how to join things, so that I can shine, I can show what I can show only. And for that, you will need skills, tools, and the right training. I obviously love this bit because I give trainings on these topics, and I see just how much you can achieve, how you can open up people's mind beyond awareness, and then give them tools to understand each other, be more empathetic, and ask the right questions. And this is a skill. Working with diversity is a skill. You have to recognize it and build it up. Doesn't matter if you're the person in the organization or you're steering the ship. Last, but absolutely not least, the human connection philosophy is also thinking about how we are going to do it in terms of practice, in terms of communication. This is an important one, everybody. You have to deliver messages in an understandable, simple, clear, and transparent way, because diversity and inclusion is so sensitive that many people are super careful about it. And then you get texts basically and speeches that are almost, you know, it's sort of, you could generate it with artificial intelligence, because you are using the standard words basically, and you're kind of addressing them, but you're not saying anything in concrete. That's not good, guys. So what we need is simple, understandable, and very clear messages, so that you are able to get through to your audience. And think about it, especially when you are talking about diversity in an international context. Many people also struggle with the language barrier. But if you're talking about mixed workplace in terms of online and offline, for many, it is a struggle to work offline, to work online. So you also have to understand diversity in that context, and to make it as simple as possible to work together. So when you talk to them, you know, don't go for the stars and the moon and the most beautiful expressions, because Oscar Wilde can do it and we can read it in our free time. But when we talk to each other, we need to be able to connect, and that has to be priority. Human connection has to be the priority also in your messages. And sometimes it's very difficult to achieve, and I know it because I studied international marketing and management. So I had my fair share in generating marketing messages, and it's very easy to just go with the flow and have these sort of texts that look familiar because everybody is writing the same way. But no, be authentic, be yourself, and try to deliver messages and your intention in a clear and in an honest, transparent way. That is going to be a game changer. Okay, so this is about the human connection philosophy in details. And now we are going to move on to a short case study and see how this model or how this philosophy works in practice.